Hey, gentlemen, thank you for being here, huh?
Hey Dan, how are you
Everything
going?
good? You guys hear me? I hear you, Riccardo.
All right. All
Okay,
right.
I hear
so
everyone perfectly.
excellent. And what language do we speak in, guys? What do you
So
want to
we
do?
agreed on English, but
We
if we
agreed
could
on
have,
English.
yes, I think so. But
Okay.
next time we use French, and if I practice my Italian good enough, maybe we could have one in Italian in the future.
I mean, English, it's such a
Great.
boring language. We should speak something more flowery, you know?
Yes. Santé.
En tout cas, santé. And
Ah,
Riccardo.
salute.
Well, for you guys,
I already drank that during the dinner.
so for you guys, it's evening right now, right?
Yeah, It's
Yeah.
but for both of us, I think it's 9 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Here too.
So I won't keep you too long with these boring questions that we discussed. Anyways, you know what? Let me just do a little biography on you guys. I don't know you guys very much other than what I know. So Riccardo, from what I read, Riccardo, you started playing war games with your father,
Yes.
and that's
Yes,
where you
with
got
my father.
and that's where you picked up the English language. Is that right?
I learned to read and then to speak in English thanks to war games. That means at when I was 8 or 9, I was better at ordering a cavalry charge than asking for a cup of tea. My English was a bit strange. I understand, but yes, I learned English in with the war game manuals and books, and then with the history books also. And my father was one of the first writers about war games in Italy. He is an historian and he's a very passionate war gamer. And he wrote one of the first books about war games in Italy. That is this one, 1979, right? Le guerre di carta, Paper Wars, which was one of the first books in Italy about wargaming. So it is all my father's fault. That is.
And the thing is that you're a historian too, no?
I am an enthusiast. I've written some books with my father, some articles. I am a member of the Military History Italian Society, SISM, Società Italiana di Storia Militare, which gathers together academics, scholars, and enthusiasts about military history. And we have also organized some events, some meetings, most of the time related with war games, because there is a very, maybe we'll talk about that later, there is a very precise interest of military historians in Italy about war games and military simulation.
And what's this here, Riccardo?
This is the last book, one of the last books I wrote about wargaming, which is Paper Wars 2.0, and which was published in 2 years ago. Yeah. And now, I have made also another book with the same publisher, which is Putting the Past into Play, Mettere in gioco il passato, about public history, the use of war games in public history. I made my contribution to that book. And now I have another book which will be published, I think soon, which is called Ariadne's Game, about Ariadne's Game. You know, Ariadne, the Minotaur, the Crete, the Princess of Crete, mythology, about political and military simulations, non-linear simulations, how I like to call them. Maybe we will have some surprise for our English-speaking readers for that book. I don't know, maybe. And I'm also a regular contributor to a game magazine here in Italy, which is Io Gioco. And I have a regular column about war games and military simulation, which is called The Die of Caesar. And it is about military and war games, military simulation and historical simulations in general. Then I contribute with other websites and portals, Gioconomicon, Geek Pizza, and other and other sources in Italian about war games.
And okay, I'm going to go to Fred now. Fred.
I have a way less impressive
no, but
resume.
the thing is, I know you like beer.
Yes, that's basically who I am. I'm just a guy. I was there. Ryan said, "You like beer? Do you have time?" I said, Sunday night, I'm bored to death. I'll join. I'll just have a beer and say hi.
And Fred, is it you? Because I looked up on the net, Fred Serval, and there was a restaurant, something beer with your name associated. Oh. Did you suggest certain restaurants or certain beers?
Yeah. It's a long story. I used to work. I actually still work in a way or another in advertising. But I was working in advertising when I was in Paris, and one of our clients was a big brewer from Denmark, actually, which is odd because I live in Denmark now. And they came to Paris to visit the agency. And one of the things that I made for them is I created a custom guide for them to have good beers all around Paris. So I created a small guide for them, and it actually stayed online. I don't know why, but it was something from a long time ago.
Everything stays online, eh?
Yes, unfortunately, that's the thing.
And
Fred, my wife would love you. She loves beer. She has been in Belgium for many years. She worked there for the European Community. So when we went to Brussels, she brought me to the best beer houses in the city.
And it's funny
because great beer country.
Here it's funny because of the French connection that we have here. French connection. Quebec is French.
Yes, it is. Yes,
we love beer. It's a colder country.
It is.
We love beer, and we've taken to the Belgian way of brewing beers. And if you guys ever come here, you will sincerely have some of the greatest beers in the world.
I'm sure of that.
It's unbelievable. But anyways, enough about beer. Fred, what's this?
So I'm the designer of Red Flag Over Paris that is currently in P500 on GMT. And Red Flag Over Paris is
I have the P500 for that, so keep up.
I hope you do. I hope everyone here has pre-ordered it, okay? And that's the spiritual successor to Fort Sumter, and it's a very compact war game on the Paris Commune that takes both into account political and military aspects of the conflict.
Okay.
And also on YouTube, I also have a channel called Homo Ludens that is talking about war games, history of war games, and culture of wargaming. And I'm also almost now a regular contributor to a war game magazine called Battles Magazine. I don't know if you've heard about it. So I've made my first review in Battles Magazine 13, and I will have yes, exactly. So you have actually an article of me in this one, and I wrote a review also in the upcoming one. So probably, I think, and I might be biased, but I think probably the best wargaming magazine in existence today.
And doesn't it come out sporadically?
Very sporadically.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. I think that people working on it are focusing on the quality rather than producing a lot. And in the end, what comes up is maybe one magazine a year. But when it comes out, it's a really good magazine. I think it's an impressive release. I have most of them, and all of them are amazing. And usually they also have some really, really interesting games. So that's definitely something to look into.
And this is your first board game design, right?
Yeah. Yes. It's my first design.
And you know what, people on chat, it's actually really inexpensive right now at the P500. This game, I think it's $27 or $26.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't even know. Wait a minute, I'm gonna check.
I think it is 26. I mean, in euros, it's probably $2, but in Canadian, it's probably $10,000. But anyways,
25 euros more or less. 25 euros.
But you have to pay for the shipping.
Anyways.
Plus the shipping.
Okay.
May I say the French connection? In Battles Magazine, we had Solferino, which was a battle where Italians and French fought together.
Yes, yeah.
So we continue our French connection.
And Battles Magazine, I think not a lot of people know it, but Battles Magazine is actually a French magazine.
Yes.
Yes.
I know that because the shipping is cheaper for this.
Yeah.
than C3I. C3I is more expensive because it comes from the States. This comes from France.
Okay, so before we get into the meat of what we're going to discuss, I have one question between Riccardo and Fred. Who's got the better food?
Oh.
No, you don't have to ask these questions to a French and Italian. You don't.
Who's got the better food?
I think
the next one will be who has got the best wine. So if you do that, if you make that question, if you ask that question, I will disconnect immediately.
Yes, okay, all right.
I think it's not a fair question, and it's it could take. If we're only keeping it to an hour, it will work.
I understand. I enjoy both cuisines very much, very much. Okay, gentlemen.
Okay.
I spoke to Harold Buchanan from the last conversation that we had, and I said, "Hey, Harold, you were the guy Fred and Riccardo were very impressed with your choosing Insurgents and this and that." And Harold said, "I love those guys. I respect them so much." So hai visto, voilà. Okay, that's all. It's a compliment.
I love what you say. Absolutely, absolutely. I'm very happy with it.
Okay, we got Nathaniel Robinson here. He wants to start a fight.
No,
he wants to start a fight. Nathaniel speaks and writes in French. So, anyways, okay. So, people of the chat, we've discussed certain questions that we wanted to approach. So, the first question is. And I'm going to go with Fred, okay? So, Fred, please, you're going to be the first one here. The differences, are there any differences in wargaming from a North American perspective to a European perspective?
And I think that with Riccardo, we'll have very different answers on this.
Absolutely.
But personally, I don't see a massive amount of differences when it comes to the formal aspect of design. I think that the connections are very, very strong in terms of the systems that we use. There is not systems that are necessarily specific to the French market or systems that are very specific to the American market. I think that for me, in my perspective, the main difference is the point of view that are taken on the games, not the way the games work themselves. And so obviously when you are in France, you will have a stronger focus, maybe in the Napoleonic era, maybe in some parts of the French history that won't be such a point of interest for American designer. So there is this point of view thing that is for me the main difference. But if you're thinking about the way the games are designed, the way they work, the influence of the designing scene in the US is so massive on European wargaming, at least modern commercial European wargaming, that you don't have, in my perspective, a significant difference. Biggest difference is the theme that are brought to the games and the perspective that is taken on specific events. But that's the way I see it. And I think it comes from the massive influence that comes from the US that has been the driver of modern wargaming for decades now. The thing that is interestingly happening now in Europe that is pretty strong is maybe a bigger proximity between wargaming and classical board games. And in France, we have a very strong board gaming scene. We have a lot of very well-known designer of board games. So obviously there is the scene that is pretty present and that drives maybe for the past decade more proximity toward this. And we have a phenomenon in France that we call Warto, which is a contraction of war games and jeux de plateau, which means board games. So Warto combined together, which is war games that are a bit more of a board game flavor. But apart from this, I think there is no major difference. And this collision of the two scenes is actually also something that you see in the US. You could say that the coin system is a Warto system. So a bit of an overlapping between jeux de plateau, so board games and war games. So for me, the main difference is historical interest, point of view, but not necessarily design approaches. But I think that maybe Riccardo has a different perspective on this.
Riccardo, go ahead. What do you think?
Well, not too different, actually. The influence of traditional American wargaming is very strong. Modern commercial wargaming was born in America, right, in the United States, with Tactics 2, Charles Roberts, Avanonilla, SPI. That is out of question. But we must always remember that modern wargaming, was born in Germany with Kriegspiel. And Kriegspiel very soon became a political and military simulation. I like to say that Wargame is the first German-style Eurogame in history. And then for a really very long time, it was seen as a typical German and European thing. The British invented miniature wargaming, actually in opposition to what we call now a wargame. After that, maybe it is because of a detachment from history. In Europe, and this is something I very often say in my YouTube channel, which is vlog, it's called Vlog, and I've made some episodes about wargaming and history. In Europe, we have a much closer relationship with history. We live in historical places.
Yes.
This is not to say that America or the States or Canada has not history. This is a simplification. But when you talk about history, you talk about 1 century, 2 centuries, 3 centuries ago. We speak about 1 millennia, 2 millennia, 3 millennia ago. Yeah. We live inside. I've seen, when I was doing researches for my book, I've seen a scenario of Memoir 44 about the fights in Rome after the September 8th, 1943, after the armistice. And that battle was fought here, in this neighborhood, and I'm a bit outside of Rome. I've seen the hexagon, where is my house, where I'm now speaking. So I don't think that there is a single square meter of Italy, France, or Denmark where a battle has not been fought.
But right. I think that this changes the way you receive the wargame, because you are more connected to it, because there is a lot of American wargaming about stuff that are happening in Europe. So of course we are more directly connected to it. But it's also their history, because it was American soldiers fighting here. Their connection is not geographical, but it is here.
But it is
very good. Very good.
It is a bit more, I think, detached. Right. There were American people, American soldiers fighting here, right, but the places are exotic. They don't know about the places. They were American soldiers fighting outside of America. And many war games made in the United States are not about wars fought by Americans. There are many ancient war games. I have here Arquebus, which is about the Italian wars, but it was just Spanish, Italians, and French fighting. So it is a bit, when I see a Pacific Theater war game, right, a game about the Pacific War in World War II, I feel a bit detached. Japanese and Americans, well, I am Italian. Technically, in World War II, everyone was my ally and was my enemy. Sometimes, so this is not a good example, maybe, but I feel detached because that theater does not belong to me. And this has led also because many war game designers, and this is very important, in the United States, maybe worked for the armed forces or for intelligence study centers. They had a very professional approach, a very scientific, hard data approach. Here in Europe, and especially here in Italy, but also in France, we had more an academic approach. There were historians who designed war games. There were not military professionals who designed war games, starting from hard data, from information. How many soldiers fought in that place, how they came, how they arrived.
I think that is less that is less a thing about the culture than the fact that our governments, I'm thinking about French government, but potentially also the Italian one, about thinking maybe to think about war and to prepare for it, we need statisticians and historians working with us, which is something that the Americans understood really early. And that's maybe the main difference, is that when they created the Rand Corporation, they understood that it was something that could be useful, and it generated a momentum to create commercial wargaming. But it's maybe more that we're more forward thinking than because we have an approach. It's just that our approach is less organized.
Absolutely, but this led to a different approach in designing a wargame. Now, there are many wargame designers here in Italy and in France that design games that are absolutely similar to American wargames. But there are many others who design them from a different perspective. And there are a lot, and I'm happy that you mentioned Harold, there are a lot of wargame designers in the United States that have taken a more academic approach. I think about Liberty of Death. Many people complained about Liberty of Death. It attracted a lot of criticism because many thought that how can we have a game about American Revolution where the Americans are not directly fighting the British, but are running from the British and they're fighting the Indians. And the French are not really helping the Americans, the patriots, right? But they are there for their own game because they want to substitute the English in American after the French-Indian War. This is a very precise historical interpretation of the events. And this is an academic approach because Harold criticized not the American Revolution. That is clear, that is obvious. It criticized a popular image of the American Revolution, an image like Mel Gibson, the patriot, patriot guerrillas going hunting for redcoats. He said, no, it didn't go that way, or at least I don't think it went that way. So now I make a game, I design an historical model with my game that tells you that the power struggle went another way. You can agree, you can disagree, but this is the model I want to build. This is what an historian says in a war game, not an analyst.
And I understand your point, Riccardo, that there is a difference between having an academic perspective and an analyst perspective in the way you approach design. The person who's making the design, the intent and his point of view is going to have an influence. But then again, for me, that doesn't show a strong difference between European and American wargaming, because exactly to your point, the game by Harold Buchanan is a good example of the differences between approaches in wargame design. But this game is designed by an American, about an American theater of operation, published by an American publisher.
And it was criticized by the Americans because it was very dissimilar from everything else they had seen before.
Using an American system. So it's a pure American war game about America, by an American, in an American system, by an American publisher.
Okay. God, this is amazing. Italians and French, they never get along. But anyways, I'm going to slip in a question here. And because we actually have Herman Lutman, I hope he's still around. Let's not be shy, people. Let's dissect what I'm going to ask you, okay? Now, Herman's game Metz, the Franco-Prussian War, Fred.
Yeah.
Do you know that game?
It's Metz at any cost?
Yes.
So
you know it well, right? Now, Herman, being an American designer living in the United States, he doesn't live in America. He lives in the United States. Just get that through your heads, guys, okay? So, now, Fred, did you read his rule book or did you play his game? And were there any discrepancies from an American point of view to a Frenchman point of view with the Franco-Prussian War? Was there anything that pissed you off that Herman did?
No, I haven't played his game, so I wouldn't know. I've only saw some reviews online, and I looked into it, and actually really wanted to try it because it looked like a very interesting tactical system. But I haven't seen anything, or I haven't read anything that is weird about that conflict. From what I read, it actually simulated pretty well the tactical implication that were at the time. And I don't know. I think that French people overall have a pretty, I would say, I don't know if it's, but unbiased opinion about the Franco-Prussian War. Most French people would agree that the war was a mistake. We weren't prepared. We got our ass kicked. It was deserved, and we shouldn't have done that war in the first place. So I don't know if there was something in the game that was something that would go against a historical assumption of a Frenchman, but I don't think it's the problem. And I think an American designer could make a great game about a French historical topic. And actually, most of the war games about French historical topics, some of the greatest games have been done by non-French people. I'm thinking about Kim Kanger, for example, who's done a lot of interesting games about decolonization in France, so Indochina, Algeria, and he's not French. So I don't think it might be a problem. I think it's really the approach that you take. If you're going to the source material, if you're looking into the archives, if you make a real historian work to approach your game, I don't think it matters where you're from. But about the Herman's game specifically, I haven't tried it, so I couldn't say anything about it.
Now, Riccardo.
Then I might say that maybe because he is not French, his game are so good, but not because the French do not make good war games, because probably French are a bit biased when they do games about France, and Italians too, and even Americans. It is something that works unconsciously.
Yeah, that's
when you are detached from a theme, it is actually easier to make a very precise model, a very correct model. I have seen very bad war games about Italy made by Italians, and I've seen very good war games about Italy made by Italians. It's nice, but usually, if you are detached from a theme, if you want to make an historical model about that event, about those events, maybe it is easier. It is quite easier. What I'm saying is that we are okay. It is a general opinion. It is a general point of view. It is not very specific, right? It's a generalization. It is just a way of saying things. But usually, when you are detached from a theme, from the events you are representing in a war game, you take a more analytical approach. When you make games, and also when you write books about events that are much closer to you, it is much easier for you to fall victim to distortions, even unconscious distortions. And so when you're a good historian and you know about that, you say, okay, I am making a model. This is my opinion. I have mainly access to, let's say, Italian sources. So maybe my research can be biased towards Italian sources. Your opinion may be different. And this is when you write a history book, when you are honest.
I see. Okay, capisci.
Okay, this is what I say. And when you write a game, which for me is not so different than writing an history book, you have to be honest. I really loved how, for example, the late Richard Berg was one of the best war game designers we have ever had. Inserted in his scenarios, in his rule sets, some optional rules, and he said, "Now, I make the scenario this way because I think that this battle went that way. But if you think, like that historian, that the battle was fought in that other place, or that Commander X didn't show up at all during the battle, right, use this optional rule. You decide."
But that's
this is a very correct way, and this is what I like. I've seen that in Nevsky by Volker Ranke. There are optional rules. If you think that the Russians didn't have this type of cavalry, don't let them use this type of units. Use this optional rule. I love that. This is what an historian should do, even when writing a war game.
But Riccardo, and that's the thing, I completely agree with you, and that's going back to the discussion that we had at the beginning about the difference between European and American war games. I think that, as you say, it's really the point of view that matters. And as a French designer, you will have a point of view that is more tainted by your own social and political bias when you're going to approach a theme that is linked to your own history, because of course history is a matter of politics. In its interpretation, it's a matter of politics
always,
and that's for me the main difference. So I don't see a main difference in approach. Maybe it might be different people. You might have historian doing more war games in France or in Italy, and more analysts in the US, but it's mostly the point of view, what material they have access to, what pre-existing bias they have when they start approaching it. And I completely agree. Working on a war game is it's making an historical object. So it makes a lot of sense because it says a lot of things. It interprets the history, but it also says something about how we see the history of the event at that moment in time, and what this person approached it. And I think the example of Richard Berg is interesting about letting the options also to the player, but that's super hard to design. But yes.
It was Richard Berg after all.
But that's the thing. I think it's mostly the point of view that has a big difference in the approaches.
So basically, and you know what? I never thought about that. That I was going to say, don't you think that someone who lives in Quebec would do a better board game than someone who lives in Italy talking about this? And it's true. It's too personal. It's too personal. And we're going to
could be. You know, then it could be. Maybe someone who lives in Quebec has access to better sources than here in Italy or in France. The problem is how you use those
absolutely
sources.
And I agree.
Whenever you read a history book, and in the introduction you read, this book is not an opinion, it is an objective point of view, close that book and throw that away.
Yes,
immediately.
Completely agree.
It is fake. It cannot be. History is not written that way.
No.
From Thucydides onward, from Herodotus onward, it is not written that way.
You're right.
Nothing is objective. Everyone is biased, and I think that's really important. And someone in Quebec, I agree with Riccardo, could make a better game because he has access to better material. What is going to be important is the mindset in which he's making the board game.
Yeah.
Accepting your own bias and saying, yes, I have my own bias, but I'm going to be honest about the event. And for me, it's exactly the thing, like Red Flag over Paris. Of course, I deeply feel about the event. I have some strong opinions about it. But the problem is not that. The problem is, am I being honest about it? Of course, I have a bias. Of course, I have my own opinion on what happened. Of course, I have some preferences for a specific faction. But the thing is, as a French designer, I have access to source material that would be hard to access for other people. And I think what is important is what mindset I'm taking. And I want to make a honest game. I want to put it out there to have people reflect about the event. I want people to know more about it. And I want it to be as good as I can. And I think as long as you have this approach, then it's really getting access to the raw material that is going to be really important. But you have to be honest with your own bias. I think that's the tough part.
Fred,
the same goes for me. If I were to design a game about Risorgimento, about the struggle of Italian independence, I will probably be biased towards the patriots, the Italian patriots, Italian Republican patriots.
And actually,
but I would say that in the introduction, right?
Yes.
If I make a game about the siege of Rome in 1849, where the French fought against the Italians, I will be biased. But I will say this is a specific view about those events made with these sources, so that I have to include a bibliography. So you can read those sources and make your own opinion.
Yourself.
And I say, I am making a game highlighting these aspects of those events. There are many other games about other aspects. That is fair. That is historical writing. That is honest historical writing.
Okay, I'm going to bring in a question by, and it's his birthday today, Hexes and Soldiers. So let's wish him a happy birthday. Happy birthday, Tattoo Man. And just because you were talking about Red Flag Over Paris, let's answer this guy's question, or else he's going to bust our chops all night. Happy birthday, AJ. Happy birthday.
Oh, and so there are a lot of birthdays,
So the question is about the Bank of France, and that's a really pivotal moment of the French Commune. So the Bank of France was the national bank, and the Bank of France was obviously holding a lot of money, was in the center of Paris, and the relationship that the Commune had with the Bank of France was at the center of a lot of debates. Karl Marx thought that they should have been way more aggressive toward the Bank of France and destroy the existing bourgeois institutions to take down the old institutions to build something new, which they didn't do. And yes, in the game, you do have a card called La Banque de France in Red Flag Over Paris, and the Commune player has to make a choice when he's playing it. Either he can increase his revolutionary momentum or he can decrease it. And if he decreases revolutionary momentum, he has access to more capabilities to build barricades and mobilize soldiers. But that comes at a cost. So he has a pivotal decision to take. So the card exists. And it's in there. So yeah, Hexes and Soldier, you do have the Bank of France in the game.
Do me a favor, Fred. He's really going to appreciate this. Tell him happy birthday in French, please.
Joyeux anniversaire.
Riccardo, can you tell him?
Buon compleanno. Buon compleanno. And buon compleanno to you then too. And to me, I was born on May the 5th.
May the 5th.
Oh, it's almost, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? Let's get another question here from Kabuki Kid.
Okay.
And I'm going to start Riccardo first, please. Do you like non-historical war games, alternate history, sci-fi, whatever?
I am a track. So yes, I like non-historical war games. I like fantasy war games, alternate history, sci-fi, when they are done right.
Okay.
I say there is no such thing as, okay, this war game is not about history, this is about a Game of Thrones, so this is not a real war game. Why? Why? This is a game about history of Westeros, but it is history after all. War games they start from history. Let's choose example. A war game about Operation Sea Lion is not a war game because Operation Sea Lion never happened. Second thing, every war game about Waterloo at the first move of the first turn is no longer history, because you make a move, you move that unit in another position that didn't happen really. It is not history. Every war game is an historical model. It is not an historical reenactment. It is very different. War games are not about real historical facts. They are about real historical dynamics, and those dynamics are what causes facts. Okay, this is what leads to facts. And war games, even fantasy, even sci-fi, even non-historical war games, have to do that right. And that is when we are speaking about simulation. And I like a lot of abstract and non-simulation games. Yeah. Wow, they are games, they are fun. They are another thing. When they are not about a reality, when the mechanics dominate the content, it is the game mechanics that create the content. Okay, they're not simulation. They can be very good games, very fun games. Great. When the content, the event, create the mechanics, modify the mechanics, because you have to represent a certain content, then you have a simulation. This simulation can be a real simulation or an imaginary simulation. But Westeros, it is not as real as our reality, right? But it has its own coherence inside the storytelling, of Game of Thrones, and that is as good as for Star Wars, Star Trek, Warhammer, every imaginary universe. If you represent that universe in a good way, in an interesting way, that is a simulation that can be a war game, and that can be a really good war game. And very probably I would like it.
And I would say that, like, to illustrate what you just said, and I completely agree, like War of the Ring, one of the best war game I played. Is it a historical war game? No, it's not, but it is.
Well,
it is true to the material. It is a great war game. It has a lot of interesting concepts in it, and it does simulate extremely well the events that happen in Middle Earth. Well, and to the question is, I do play a lot of sci-fi games. The latest one that I've been playing a lot is Eclipse: Second Dawn for the Galaxy, which is a really cool 4X civilization building game, and a lot of fantasy games. And actually, the first war game I played was Warhammer Fantasy Battle when I was a teenager. So I came from there. So and it's like, and I'm not ashamed of it. It's okay. I'm not a fan of figuring war games anymore, but it was a great experience. I loved it, and I think it's I have no problem with mixing the two. I think it's fine.
And by the way,
you know Fred, that one of the next episodes.
Hey, Fred, your analogy of Middle Earth, I was there. It's real. By the way,
yes, yeah.
Well, you understand? Because I've never read a book.
But we've all been there.
Okay, I appreciate that.
It's real for all of us. And
I've been there, man.
Real. We've all been there. We've all been there.
It's
even more real for us than the Second World War in a way, because we all read the book. We all know the history.
I've been there.
Probably.
I've been there. I got some guy. He's busting my chops. Trevor Just here. Okay, look. He says, Riccardo, Fred, are you okay with someone representing the news? I don't know who he's talking about. Of conflict games who has never played Twilight Struggle. What a coincidence. I've never played Twilight Struggle. So is there a problem here?
I just don't think that... I think Twilight Struggle is an awesome game. And to those who have this debate, is it a war game or not? I think it is a war game. But I don't think it's mandatory to have played Twilight Struggle to be a war gamer. I think it's fine. I think you're okay. Don't worry about it then. I think you should be a bit ashamed of it, but it's fine. You can live with it. It's okay.
Okay, you can live with it. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. We won't judge you. We won't judge you.
Let me see here. Herman's got something to say. He gives us his opinion. Because Herman's got a lot of opinions. He's American. You know, they can't shut up, these guys.
Yeah, and he's right. It's a really good comment.
Yeah, that is internally consistent and logical. That's it.
And look at that. Oh, hey. Look at that, Trevor Just.
Oh.
Hey, Trevor Just. I have an Italian word in my head that I can't say over here because it's a family show. But it starts with V and it ends with O, and in the middle it's fan. Hai capito? Whatever. Okay, guys, let's go on here.
Maybe the thing about, because I think, and Kabuki Kid is saying something about this, about Twilight Struggle is a war game, but it's not about the hot war. And I think maybe there is the main problem that comes around this and why there is so many debate is that people are talking about war game, but I think the debate should be solved about what is war. And I think it's the main problem is like, as long as you agree on the definition of war, you shouldn't have a problem on the definition of a war game. And as long as you understand that war is organized violence or confrontation, organized means that it's political. And that's the thing, it's economical, it's political, and the mechanical aspect, the violent aspect of it is just one facet of war. And I really like this quote. So it was something that they were putting on the canons of Louis XIV, Louis XIV, Ultima Ratio Regum. So it's the final argument of the king. So it is a purely political thing. So the fact that you have a war or not, it doesn't matter as long as you have a political confrontation, an economical confrontation. The fact that the main aspect of it is not mechanical warfare, it doesn't matter. War is still organized violence, organized confrontation, and it could be between states. It could be between different groups. It could be within a country, and that's the thing. And I think as long as you see war that way, the debate about is Twilight Struggle war game or not is not a debate anymore.
It's a moot point. Dan, you know what von Clausewitz said? Politics is the purpose. War is the tool. We cannot speak about the tool without speaking about the purpose.
The purpose, yes.
It is, it is quite simple. How many wars do you create during a typical Twilight Struggle play? I can say 7 or 8 wars around the globe. Local wars, small wars, but people die in that wars. For the people involved in that wars, that is war. So Twilight Struggle is a war game. Yes. It is a political military simulation. Yes, absolutely. About how you, among many things, how you can use war as a political instrument. And it is a very modern definition of war. Have you ever played Europe in Turmoil? It is Twilight Struggle, but before the Great War. It is a great game, fantastic game. And there are many, Europe in Turmoil by Compass Games. I don't remember. It was an European author. It was an European game designer. I think from Denmark or something. Great game. And it is a game like Twilight Struggle, political simulation with war. And it is a war game. And you move your influence between the French bourgeoisie, the French army, the Russian Orthodox Church. There are 2 parties, 2 factions involved, the authoritarians and the reformers. It is very interesting. And the game ends when real global war breaks out, the Great War, such as in Twilight Struggle, when a nuclear war can break out. But it is still a war game. Whenever I hear someone saying, nice game about conflict, but it is not a war game, I say you have a very limited notion of game and war.
Yeah.
If you have limited notions of these 2 parts, 2 elements of war game, you have a very limited notion of what a real war game can be. And Jim Dunnigan wrote these exact things in the early 80s in his war games handbooks. If you read Jim Dunnigan's work, you see exactly that when he says it is about war game, conflict simulation is a fancy term for two very unsavory terms, war and game, but it is still war and game. Krieg und Spiel.
Okay. Don't speak German. That makes me uncomfortable.
We're getting a little bit away from the subject, but I'm gonna get away later for sure. But let's get back on track here. So. You guys being Europeans, by the way, how old is the United States?
How old?
Yeah, how old is the United States? How old is North America? So, you know what I'm saying?
They are 2 very different things.
Separate the 2.
Okay, how
separate thing. We have a 1776 for the United States, but even before.
and how old is your mother's house, Riccardo?
Sorry?
How old is your mother's house?
My mother's house, well, it is not very old because we live in a modern neighborhood. But my grandmother's house in Cassino, in Monte Cassino, was, I think, 3 or 4 centuries old.
Okay, thank you. All right.
At least.
But that doesn't say
that the Americans came and blew that up and demolished the house. So I don't know.
my mother's house is 800 years old. So, anyways, I'm saying that because it's
great. There is a lot of history. It is very good.
And I really like this idea that Americans have a different perspective on history because they don't live in very old houses is a bit weird.
Hey, this is my show. Shut up.
Fair enough. But I think it's a weird point. I think it's a really weird point.
Okay, there you go. You know, you always get a Frenchman on to start trouble all the time. Okay.
We Italians never argue.
Never.
No, never disagree.
Yeah. We always agree on everything. It's heartwarming.
Okay, so you know what? Okay, since Fred wants to talk, how did wargaming spread and develop in France, Fred?
Oh my God, that's an awful question. I think it spread it out, or like going back to the history of it, the military used it at the end of the 19th century already. Kriegspiel had obviously a great influence on other armies around Europe, so they were influenced by it, especially seeing the result of the 1870 war. I think the fact that the officers, the Prussian officers, were prepared using Kriegspiel was an inspiration that it was probably something interesting. And in France, we had the French army had a lot of things called exercices sur carte, which were things like Kriegspiel, where you had two factions. Each of them were in a room. They were on a map, and they were drawing things on a map. And you had an empire saying, well, this is happening like this. This is happening like that. And actually, you have a French war game on Napoleonic warfare called Le Vol de l'Aigle, which keeps that idea where you have, so Le Vol de l'Aigle is a system where you have different teams. And in each team, one person is going to be in charge of a corps, and he's going to say to the game master or the empire, well, with my corps, I'm going from there to there. This is the amount of men I have. This is the amount of resources I have. And the game goes for around a few months. And you really play like this full simulation. It comes from Exercice sur Carte. So you had the military doing war games, and it was there. Maybe not as popular or as developed as it was in the US, but still it was there. But then I think what had a major impact on wargaming, commercial wargaming, was obviously the US. When Avalon Hill and SPI started doing games, of course, it had an influence in France. And you had, I think, one big company that was a company that was also having board games shops that started editing war games and board games. That was Descartes. They actually, I think, published also games in Italian, and they localized a lot of American games, but they did a lot of war games. But that they stopped a while ago. But I think we always had an ongoing culture of wargaming in France that was structured around pretty strong magazines and publishers. And I think one of the magazines that is key, at least, and has been key for a few decades for French wargaming is Vae Victis. I think Vae Victis is obviously something that is like pivotal for French wargaming. And then around it, you have really strong publishers. Thinking about Hexasim. That is also a lot of European wargamers know Hexasim because it's also a good place to buy games. And we've got Nuts, we've got Asynchrone that is also doing the academy games in French. So we have those companies, but I think that probably Vae Victis was a good vector for French wargaming because you had a way to have access to news. You had an easy way to publish magazine war games. So it was a good way for young designers to start making their own design. And I think it was a great vector for French wargaming. But then I'm no expert of the history of French wargaming, but there was definitely these two phases where we had war games in the military, then war games for the public, and commercial war games was, mostly American influence. And
Riccardo, what about in Italy?
Well, Italy and France are very closely connected. So many things are quite in common, culturally very, very closely related. We also had, I've seen just today, in December 16th, 1872, it is the first official mention of war games in the Regio Esercito, in the Italian army, right? 1872, just after the Franco-Prussian War.
Yeah.
The problem is, and I'm not kidding this time, that we fought World War II on the very wrong side. This means this has led a denial of military culture as a reaction after the war, not as strong as in Germany, right? But in Italy, even today, to speak about military matters, military history, and war in general, it is a bit difficult from a political point of view.
Yeah.
So in Italy, when we think about commercial wargaming after the war, then we say in the 70s mainly. In the 60s we had not much thing, but in the 70s we began to receive the first war games from the United States, and it was quite difficult. You had to ship them by sea. You had long waiting. You had to do everything by mail. Those were the pioneers. It was my father's generation, and we started great magazines about gaming in general that had a very strong presence of war games inside that magazines, but they were not very specialized magazines about war games in that phase during the 80s. Then in the late 80s and in the 90s, we had a great crisis. Also in the United States, there was a great crisis of wargaming all around the world, because there were many rivals. There were role-playing games, computer games, and then card games, many things, right? And so wargaming in Italy persisted, survived, thanks to many who still gathered together at small clubs, made great national tournaments, but it was an enclosure, a very closed environment. They helped the hobby survive what I like to call the long winter of wargaming. And then now, and we had many great magazines about war games, but they had not many issues, or they were mainly about miniature wargaming, which still continued, but board wargaming was in a state of crisis. Then we had the Renaissance, the spring, we can call that, in the late 90s until today, with the re-emergence of war games. And now we have, we have Yojoku, which is a gaming magazine where I have a column about war games. We have very good specialized magazines, Parabellum,
yes,
for example.
Yeah, great magazine.
It's great. It is a great magazine. A bit on the model of Evictis, but also different with with a game inside, etc. We have many publishers, ACS, Europa Simulazioni, Aleph Game Studies, Dissimula. You had in the US Radetzky's March by Sergio Schiavi and his Dissimula publisher. They are small or medium publishers. Some of them also make, ACES, for example, makes also history books, military history books. So they are mixed publishers, but they go on creating very great games. So we are in a state of renaissance. Maybe also because we are in the wake of Eurogames, gaming environment in general just flourished again. It is becoming a mainstream phenomenon. It is no more just a nerd thing. It is a mainstream phenomenon. So we went a bit on the wake of that phenomenon, with many those who helped the war game community survive the long winter, the crisis year, that now have a new public. See many new gamers, many young gamers. Maybe the problem is now, what I see, maybe a bit of a problem to get together old-time players, old-time war gamers, and new players that can have different opinions. There are many old-time war gamers who are very open-minded, who are curious about innovation, who welcome innovation. There are others who say, well, this is not a real war game. We like to play traditional war games. And that is fair, that is good. But it is something that I'm seeing the more and more, every month, every year. So this is not an issue. It is a feature wargaming, and I think that it is a feature. When I see Gen Con, it is a feature also of wargaming in the United States. Everywhere we have a relationship with the mainstream gamers to play Euro games and other type of games, and we are faced with that public, and sometimes it is not so easy to understand each other. No. So maybe this is another challenge for the future of wargaming.
Now, Fred, in France, because I know you're in Denmark right now. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. In France, where are you from exactly in France?
Southwest of France. So the region was
Occitanie.
Gironde. So
Gironde.
next to the Spanish border.
Okay. So are there any flagship stores with a lot of war games?
I could say that for Paris, because before moving in Denmark, I had all my career in Paris. So when I was a active war gamer, I was living in Paris. So yes, there are definitely like emblematic shops in Paris for wargaming. Unfortunately, they have less and less war games being sold on those in those shops. But I would say you have 3 major shops in Paris where you could buy war games. So you have L'Oeuf Cube, Star Player, and Le Damier de l'Opéra. I think that would be the 3 main places in Paris where you could find war games. But if you go in Paris or in France and you want to bring back a souvenir war game, I would really recommend that you just buy a Vaevictis. I think it's because you will have a French war game magazine with a French war game in it. You will find the rules in English online, and it will be designed by a French person, potentially on a French topic that you would never have heard of. That could be, and it's cheap and it's awesome. So,
but it's funny because I live in Quebec, so we get Vaevictis.
Yeah, but that's the power of francophonie, and that's why.
C'est quelque chose là. Ricca, what about in Rome?
In Rome, we had a very great shop. It was run by a friend of my father, Roberto Flaibani, and that shop was called Strategia e Tattica, which is strategy and tactics in Italian. Yeah, and it was a great shop. Regretfully, it closed. There are other shops in Rome, but we have a very big shop and online seller, which is I Giochi dei Grandi in Verona. If you go on the GMT website, maybe all of the Italian translations of GMT review books you see on the GMT website have the writing I Giochi dei Grandi, because they import GMT games in Italy, and then they do that as a free service, a translation of the manual in Italian. We have other stores all around. We have many chain stores, but many times they are general game stores with a good presence of war games. But that was the situation, I think, until 5 or 6 years ago. Now you see many gaming stores that have a small wargame corner, maybe with some GMT titles, multi-man publishing titles, maybe some Compass and magazines. But that is all. Mainly you buy war games in Italy from Italian online sellers, online shops you have, and from French or German shops, where you can find it. You have a good shipment rate inside the European Union. Yeah, but outside of some exceptions, I think Rome, Doppio Gioco, Rishadan, and other shops. There are other realities outside of Rome, but they were war game shops which converted to general gaming shops most of the times. And so the war game space grew smaller and smaller.
Now, if you guys ever come to Quebec, and you come to Montreal, please obviously give me a call.
Yes.
We have a flagship store here that has 2 wall. It's called Le Valet de Coeur.
Oh.
And it's just a huge place, and there's 2 walls dedicated to war games. Any war game that you could think of, boom, they have it, which is unbelievable.
That doesn't exist anymore in France.
No, I remember the days of when I was a kid. I went to Strategia e Tattica near the Colosseum because they had the shop there, and I spent entire afternoons reading and watching and touching war games. I have a question for Fred. What happened to Jeu de Cartes in Paris? Jeu de Cartes.
That doesn't ring a bell. Where was it?
Still open?
Where was it?
Near Avenue de la République, I think.
Okay,
they were also a publisher.
Because near to République, you had a lot of the old board game shops became either video game. They either became video game shops or manga shops and stuff like this.
Yeah,
and I would say that you now have you do have a lot of big board game shops that still exist, but most of them they don't really sell war games or not war games as we think about when we talk about war games. So historical war games, not that much. And I think there is only 3 shops left in Paris where they sell actual war games.
Bad.
Unfortunately.
Too bad. Too bad.
Okay, I have a couple of more questions. I wanted to keep the show an hour. I wanted to keep it tight, but we all get excited and it goes on.
Good luck with that. Good luck. With an Italian and a French. Good luck.
Oh, actually, there is someone that is mentioning Napoleon 1807 by Chaco's Games. So I didn't mention Chaco's Games because it's a pretty new French publisher, but they did release 1806 a couple of years ago, and it's I was mind blown by it. Like the simulation of operational warfare with very simple rules, but it feels perfect. Amazing system.
It feels right.
And 1807 is going to be great. And 1815 is coming up next. And it's going to be completely insane. And I'm really looking forward to it. So yes, Chacos, look what they do. It's a very new publisher, but what they're releasing is insane. And actually, the guy who released those games started in Vaivictis, doing a series called Les Maréchaux. That was the origin story of 1806 is an adaptation of Les Maréchaux. It's just a block game version of Les Maréchaux with cards and everything, but a lot of the ideas existed from there. And this is where you see the importance of having a good magazine, because you have new designers that come in, they try new things, and then they create their own things. And I think Chaco's Games is a perfect example of that. But sorry, Dan.
I mentioned
no, it's okay. I
mentioned that Napoleon 1806 in a series on the Joconomicon website about the first war games that you can play divided by historical period. I made that series of 5 games for each great historical period, and Napoleon 1806 was one of the first that came out of my mind for the Napoleonic period. Perfect to introduce someone to Napoleonic wargaming, serious Napoleonic wargaming. It is not simplistic in any way.
Operational,
you have operation, logistics, attrition, everything, command and control. Everything for the war also.
For operational warfare, I would say that's the best system, and for tactical, I think that the best system for tactical Napoleonic warfare would be Fallen Eagle, the Eagles of France series.
Great game.
Yeah, like I think it's but it's more for the tactical side. It's a bit heavier, but on operational 1806.
And the Jour de Gloire series.
But I prefer Eagles of France. Yeah.
Great.
Once again, Frédéric B, also a regular designer in Vaivictis. So once again, so that's
And together with Richard Bag. Oh, this is new. Yes. I have yet to see that. Yeah.
Okay, I just got it. I haven't played it, but let me tell you, the components are beautiful. The map is gorgeous, and it's his first game.
Oh, okay. But it's the area.
Very interesting.
It's the area impulse game on Waterloo, right?
Yes.
Very interesting.
I'm interested in it because I'm preparing a video for June where I'm gonna do a comparative analysis of war games on Waterloo for the anniversary of the Battle of Waterloo. And I was considering, should I go for this one or should I keep with my own selection or not? But let me know if it's good. Let me know if it's good, and I will look into it. But
there is also a good game about Marengo coming up, I think, in Kickstarter. Yeah, about
with those very
it is very interesting because it had Eurogames components, pawns and special dice and dials and little things about the units. Many interesting components together with a traditional war game. I'm very curious about that.
I was gonna say, look at this. Look. You guys know Jan Heinemann from Let's Play History? Could you believe a German is telling a Frenchman and an Italian to keep talking? What's the world coming to?
We have won, Fred. We have won.
We finally won. Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
It's the magic of Europe. We finally get together, more or less.
I think Jan is a scholar too. I mean, he puts out a video a minute, so maybe we should.
Yeah, great channel. Great channel.
You know what I'm saying? Look, I'm having too much fun here, manager. So, okay, Fred, did I ask this question already? What's the current situation in France with war games? But you're in Denmark right now.
But I'm pretty close. I'm pretty close to
and
France.
Hold on a second. People from the chat. I was asked by these two gentlemen over here. I cannot discuss where they work. That's how secret these guys are. I mean,
no, it's not secret.
It's as if I'm speaking to Volko or if I'm speaking to Mark Herman. I asked him a question. They say you can ask anything you want. I'm just not going to say anything. But anyway,
for me, it's not secret in the same way. It's not secret in the same way.
This is a difference. This is Europe.
It's just you guys look like spies to me, anyways. But anyways,
nah.
What's the situation? What's happening in? You know what? Give us a really quick. What's happening in Denmark? I bet you nothing. And what's happening in France?
In regards to wargaming, right?
Yeah, obviously.
Actually, in Denmark, what I would say that, and I don't really know super well the wargaming scene, but I play wargames with quite a few Danish people. I would say that ASL is pretty strong in Denmark. So I think most of the wargaming community is structured around ASL. But then you have a lot of grog nerds spread around the country that play a lot of different war games. But to my knowledge, there is no Danish publishers of war games. But there are a few war game designers in Denmark, and pretty good ones. And one of my most regular wargaming buddy is actually a wargame designer called Brian Asklevansen. And he was a designer for the Muskets and Pike series on GMT. So he made No Saints in Armor, Nothing Gained But Glory. And he's doing some war games for academy games right now in different series. So Burst of Europe and Fog of War. Okay. So you have actually in Scandinavia overall, you do have designers, but you don't really have a lot of publishers. You don't have magazines. And I would say that the community is mostly structured around AESL, so it's not as strong. In France, it's way more structured. You have the publishers, so that's what we talked about, and we have new publishers coming in. We have we have more established publishers that are still here, still producing war games. So I would say that the situation in France is actually looking pretty good for war games. We have a convention now we've had for a few years in Paris called Open de Paris des Jeux d'Histoire, OPJH. And it's a really great convention that happens in September in Paris. That also where you have a lot of publishers coming in, a lot of designers. So the community is pretty structured. We have our own forums, we have our own magazines, we have our own publishers, a lot of designers. And in Denmark, it's obviously less structured. It's a smaller country, and they don't have the same history and relationship with.
Now, at that convention, Fred, what's the attendance?
I wouldn't know what was the attendance last time, but it's actually pretty. It's not Gen Con.
Nothing is Gen Con.
It's a library in Paris. It's in Library Adolphe Thiers, by the way. So connection with Red Flag Over Paris is there also. But Library Adolphe Thiers, and I would say it's maybe in a few hundreds, maybe in thousands.
That's good.
I would say that probably more around. When the last time I went there, I think the attendance was 500, 600, something like this. But it was a few years back. And I'm planning on going back this year to do the demo of the game, actually. And it's really great. You have publishers, but you also have it's also a convention about gaming. So you have people coming in for tournaments, but also to play really big version of games that they have at home, but in really big formats over a span of a few days. and it's pretty cool. So it works well. The community is helpful.
I think that's fantastic. I think if you hit 500 in terms of wargaming, you're starting to have a big crowd. You know?
Yeah.
And that's my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay, Rica, what's going on in Italy?
Okay, what's going on? Firstly, we have the main Italian convention, which is Modena Play, and which started as a wargaming convention, just like Gen Con. And we have an area, an historical board game area called the BG Storico, and that is present in the middle of the convention. It is a bit, when I see the insurrection model in Gen Con by Harold, it is quite similar. The difference is that we are just inside, in the middle of the convention. This general gaming convention, there are tens of thousands of attendees, and the BG Storico area, there are many hundreds of people who come there and they try wargame and they are introduced to wargaming. And then there are specialized events like that in Paris. We have San Marino Game Convention, which is actually another country, I would say, but it is quite close. So I can say we joke about that, saying that it is an international convention. It is the most attended international conventions by Italians, which is great. And it is,
do you get to see Mauro Faina Schiavi?
And Mauro organizes the Casus Belli Club convention, which is Gioco e Storia, in a fantastic place.
Is that well attended?
Yeah. Even I think 300 or 400, and maybe even more regularly in that convention. The convention is made in a great location. It is an historical museum about World War II, with a lot of World War II actual tanks and vehicles. Nice souvenirs left here by the British and the Americans and the Germans when they came here last time, armed. And we also have the Federazione Italiana del Wargame, the 5th day, FIW day, that started this year. And we had many guests. We had an historical conference. Me and my dad, we organized that conference with CISM, and we had also international guests, Cook from MMP and Pascal Tupi from Exasim. And we spoke. Pascal Tupi came there to present. He still had not the actual copies, but to talk about. There is a video on YouTube. Pascal speaks in French, and I translate. Very nice in Italian. And in that event, Pascal presented the British expansion for Great War Commander, which is a great system.
I want to know what type of food is available at that convention, Riccardo.
The best food in the world, actually. What a question.
In 1 minute, can you describe what's it called?
Obviously, we have, if you want, pasta, pizza, and many types of meat. And you have melanzana alla parmigiana, and you have lasagne, and you have also desserts, great desserts.
Do you have prosciutti, capicolli, mortadella?
Yes, and very good wine, actually.
Okay, let me ask this guy over here, Fred. You guys serve hot dogs and hamburgers?
No. No. That's not.
I'm
that's
joking.
Not really a thing.
I'm joking. So do you guys have food over there? Like, you know?
No, you would actually go out for food. So because it's in a very old, beautiful library in the center of Paris. So you wouldn't be able to have the mayor, like the. Would not accept that you bring in food, so you go outside. But the thing in Paris is that it's not really hard to find a good place to eat around, so it's fine. You're okay. You can just walk around, and within 50 meters, you can find anything you want to make you happy.
Can I get?
Probably not a lot of hot dogs, but you can find good stuff.
Oh my God, that's funny. Can I get some good bread in France?
Yeah.
Okay. Enough of this tomfoolery. You know what? Do you guys have any questions to each other? Riccardo, hit him.
Oh, okay, Fred, what made you had the idea of becoming a game designer, not just a war game enthusiast? What made you do that step, that last step, to try and, okay, now I want to design a game. I am a war gamer. I want to design a game and propose that game to a publisher.
That's a really interesting question, because I don't think I thought at some point I want to be a war game designer. I think it came from something else. I was playing a lot of war games, and I got interested in the Paris Commune, which is an event that is not treated a lot in history at school in France. But I got interested in it for political reason, socio-political interest, and I was obsessed by wargaming, and I was thinking about the Paris Commune, and I really liked the fact to approach an event through wargaming. And it came from a frustration. I wanted to play a game on the Paris Commune, and there was no game on the Paris Commune. So I didn't think about I should become a designer. I was just frustrated that there was no game on the Paris Commune that existed. And this is where it came from. So I thought about, well, if I wanted to do a game on the Paris Commune, how would I do it? And that's just how it started. And I started building something up. And then I said, maybe I should warn GMT so I don't make something that they are doing or they might be interested. And they just said, yeah, go for it. We're interested. If something works out, we'll make it in, we'll put it in the P500. And it almost started by accident. But now that I've started doing it, I started really liking it a lot. But it was at first coming from a frustration to not be able to play a game on the Paris Commune. And I became a designer by accident, and I hope to release a lot of war games in the future. But that was not the original intent. Definitely.
Look, like necessity is the mother of invention, eh? Yeah. And do you have a question for our Italian Fred there?
Yes, I do have one. You write a lot. You write books. You write articles. Why don't you make war games?
That was my question to Riccardo.
Yeah, and this is that is why I made you that question before, because I don't think I will be able to design a war game. No, sure. I think I will be able to give advice to someone designing war games. Historical advice, surely. Historical documentation, I've already done that. Play test, even suggest some mechanics. But I think that designing a war game that is an interactive representation of events, well, I think it is much harder than writing a book. When I write a book about history, I am giving you my opinion, you confront with yours, but it is just one line of telling, one telling of the story.
Yeah.
A game has many tellings of the same story, and all those tellings, all those versions have to be coherent, have to be consistent. As Herman said, you have to insert mathematical models, mathematical combinations. I think that the mathematical genius in our family ended with my grandfather. I am very bad at mathematics. So I think I can write well about war games, speak about war games. Designing a war games, it is something sometimes I think, well, for your exact reasons, no one made a war game about the siege of Rome in 1849 by those pesky Frenchmen. Yes. Okay, and so someone should do that. Old stories. One of my ancestors was fighting here in Rome and died because of the French. Old family stories. But the problem is, and another revelation, Fred, I am half French. I have to say that half of my family comes from Normandy, and because of that pesky French revolutionaries, my family had to escape from Normandy because they were nobles, and so they came back to Italy. So here you are. No, to be serious, you know how history is close to us. We
No
cannot
kidding.
even think outside of history. So yes, maybe someday I will try to design a war game. Maybe I don't think I am ready yet. That is, I have many ideas, but and maybe sometimes they will. But for one thing, I have to be sure it must be different. There are many great war games about many events with many great mechanics. But if you design it different, and I love Fred's work because it is also different, it starts from the system of Force Hunter, but from what I've seen, it is also very different. If you design a war game, do it special. Make it special. There are many great war games. You can also do make a traditional war games, no problem. But if you really want to start writing war games, write something different. Just try to give us players your personal vision of the events.
Now,
what
Fred,
you think.
Fred, your game now that it was created out of frustration and anger. Is that what I'm going to feel playing this game?
Yes. That's actually, I had a discussion with another designer about it. So I gave him a playtest. It's a guy who's working on a new coin game on the medieval Japan called Joe Dewhurst. And we talked about the game after the demo, because after the demo he pre-ordered it. And I told him what I wanted you to feel in the game is the feel that you had a lot of choices to make, not a lot of time, not enough resources. I wanted you to feel pain. And he said, that's exactly how I felt. And I was like, yes, success.
Okay, good. Ah, well.
So it's not a fun game. It's awful. It's an awful experience.
It was a very desperate event.
Yes, it was.
Well, gentlemen, I'm going to cut this. This was a lot of fun. We should do it again. And we should actually take more questions from the comments, which I think is fantastic. I know this is our first time, so we wanted to approach it with a certain subject in mind. So, guys, stick around there. I'm gonna cut the show, and thank you very much, people, for commenting, and happy birthday, AJ, and Jan Heinemann, and Schuldigung, and well, let me see here. Para. Oh, by the way, Riccardo, what did you have for supper tonight?
Pizza with mushrooms. I sent you the photo. Pizza with mushroom.
I thought there was.
I was a bit jealous.
It looked like
roasted them.
She's having a carciofi. She's having a carciofi.
No. Mushrooms and roasted them, and mozzarella.
Of course. And Fred, what did you
tomato. Tells me my wife.
Fred, what did you have?
Nothing as exciting. So yeah, I cannot beat Riccardo on this one.
Is it because
I live in Denmark, not in France? That's
my
why.
wife,
that's
not me. My wife.
Yeah, my Denmark, wife. I mean, you can in Denmark. You can get what? Some good cheese.
No, the food is great in Denmark. Actually, a lot of French people have this obsession, thinking that if I don't live in France and if I don't live in Italy, I won't have good food. And like apart from France and Italy, we won't have good vegetables. We won't be able to have good food.
Go in England. Just don't go in England. The food is poisonous there.
In Denmark, we eat
food
perfectly
is harmful
well.
there.
It's very nice. It's very nice.
Scotland is great, but England, no, don't eat anything.
Well, hold on. I've got my story too. Did you guys ever go to the States?
Yeah.
Yes, when I was very young.
Did you eat
many times?
Did you eat the food?
Yeah, but you have no choice.
Well, yes. I mean, Fred, you're such a smart aleck. You know what I mean?
No, but I think you're unfair. I think there is a lot of places where you can have really good food in the US. I think the barbecue culture is amazing.
It's yes. I'm joking. I'm joking. Because obviously the restaurants are run by Italians. But anyway. So guys, thank you very much. This was the best. Stay around and facciamo una camminata. Okay, hold on a second here. What am I doing? I'm gonna And you guys didn't say nothing about the intro. I put it together. I edited it.
It was awesome, Dan. I was impressed.
Awesome.
I was crying when I saw it on Twitter. I was like, my God, the work that he puts in it. I was amazed. And I sorry I didn't knew when was the time to say it. I wanted to say, Dan, thank you very much. That was great to invite us and to do this presentation.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Écoute-moi, Fred. Okay.
We say it not in French.
Okay.
Not this time.
Thanks, guys. Stick around.